everyone. Good morning to our members in India and good afternoon to those joining us from Australia for this webinar, COVID-19 Survival and Growth Strategies for IT and IT-enabled service companies. A special thank you to Deepak Padaki and Vidyanand Sagaram from our Bengaluru chapter committee for leading on this initiative. So just some background, the Bengaluru chapter of the Indo-Australian Chamber of Commerce was launched last September by ministers from the Karnataka and the Victorian governments, and also supported by ITeS and the Australian Consulate General in Chennai. So it struck me this morning that it's a fabulous coincidence to have a similar representation today. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to our speakers and panelists for this morning and briefly introduce them as well. We sent detailed bios across by, via the email invite, so just a quick introduction. We have Michael Costa, Deputy Consul General from the Australian Consulate in Chennai, and he's been in that role since August 2018. He is responsible for cultivating strategic, economic, and people-to-people ties between Australia and South India. We have Mr. Praveen Rao, who is the Chief Operating Officer of ITeS and the whole-time Director of the Board. As the Chief Operating Officer, Mr. Rao has overall strategic and operational responsibility for the entire portfolio of the company's offerings. He has over 33 years of industry experience. He is a member of the National Council of CII and is currently the chairman of NASSCOM. So welcome, Michael and Praveen Rao. I then move on to our second speaker, who is Ms. Meena Nagaraj, IS Director, Department of Electronics, IT and BT, and MD Karnataka Innovation Technology, Society Government of Karnataka. So Ms. Nagaraj has 23 years of diverse experience across the government sectors and the finance service industry. She has previously served as advisor to the Chief Minister of Karnataka and worked in collaboration with World Bank and for the Central Government of India in her role as Deputy Secretary. Our final speaker is Mr. Andrew Tilak, Mr. Andrew Tilak, Executive Director, Innovation, Digital and Bioeconomy, State Government of Victoria. Andrew has an extensive background in industry development, including consulting, government and corporate sectors. Beginning his career with KPMG in Melbourne, he went on to work with Austrade for 8 years. He was CEO of Trade and Investment Queensland in 2014 before taking on this new role. So welcome, Ms. Meena Nagaraj and Mr. Andrew Tilak as well. In terms of the agenda and the event flow, we'll have Michael Costa soon presenting the opening remarks. We'll then have expert insights from our speakers. We'll have the opportunity for question and answers, 20 minutes, and then we have closing remarks by Deepak Padaki. If I can just request all speakers to have your, to mute yourselves at the moment. Yes, thank you very much. And just a few housekeeping points before I hand over to Michael for his opening remarks. Except for speakers, all of us will be on mute. We are recording the session to be able to share the link with all of you later. You'll also have the opportunity to ask questions during the question and answer session, so do make note of that. We have, you'll see a chat box at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. You can type in your questions there, and Vidyanand will facilitate that. So now, without further ado, let me welcome Michael Costa, Deputy Consul General, Australian Consulate in Chennai, to deliver the opening remarks. Great to have you here, Michael, and over to you.
What's going on?
Hello, is Michael there? Yeah, great.
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can, Michael. Welcome. Hi.
All right. Look, thanks very much for the warm welcome, Petula. A very good morning to the IACC members and to the panellists based here in India, and a good afternoon to those joining us from Australia. It's great to see the newly formed Bengaluru chapter of the IACC take this initiative to host this webinar on the IT sector, arguably one of the most important sectors during lockdown, and certainly will be critical for establishing the new normal or the new business as usual practices of a post-COVID world. I'd like to make a few points, first about the COVID situation here in India, how Australia and India can work together across this industry, and also to highlight some of the things I'd love to get from this session. Now, there's no question that India's swift and decisive action to impose a lockdown has saved lives. India has used this time to treble its number of hospitals, hospital beds, expand manufacturing of its PPE, its ventilators, its pharmaceuticals, and also to strengthen its testing regime. There's currently around 165,000 cases in India and regrettably around 4,500 deaths. But experts say that this could have been much closer to 1 million had the lockdown not been imposed. And it's even more remarkable when you compare India to the rest of the world. If you look at the EU and UK together, that's half of India's population, yet they have more than 10 times the number of cases and almost 30 times, regrettably, 30 times the number of deaths. So India has had some success in flattening the curve, but there's still a way to go. But the pandemic and the lockdown has also created other challenges, especially economic. We've seen aviation, tourism, construction as some of the hardest hit sectors, and we're also seeing the IT sector, who's actually emerging as a bit of a high performer, especially as businesses start to digitise and accelerate their adoption of digital infrastructure and capability. In Australia, like most countries, we've also grappled with these challenges, and we seem to be coming out of the crisis a little bit faster than most developed nations, but again, there's still a way to go. We've supported our citizens and our businesses. Yes, we've had restrictions on movement, but we've also strengthened our health system, and we've made sure that we provide an economic stimulus package, almost $260 billion, that accounts for around 13% of our GDP. So in these uncertain times, Australia does have quite a bit to offer, especially in the technology sector. We have the expertise and experience, having managed the transition of a number of traditional sectors to incorporate technology and IT services into mining, agriculture, education, financial services and healthcare. And we also are emerging as a bit of a world leader in cybersecurity and developing the right policy framework and the rules and norms to govern a safe development of critical tech, including AI, Internet of Things, quantum computing, and 5G. We're finding many IT firms, and including those from India, attracted to Australia's stable regulatory environment, our digital literacy, and our openness to innovation and disruption. And we still believe that Australia is the perfect launching pad to test digital platforms in a Western market before stepping into larger markets that might carry greater risk. So we're keen to build on this. We're keen to deepen our technology partnership with India, where we can have Australian expertise and Indian talent come together. And this will be an important feature of the upcoming virtual leaders summit between our prime ministers, where we hope to elevate the relationship to a comprehensive strategic partnership. So that's quite exciting. So today I'd be very keen to hear from the experts about the trends that they're seeing in the IT sector and the IT-enabled services sector, where they've seen the highest demand for their services, what are some of the key challenges and opportunities that a post-COVID world presents the industry, and how government, both here in India but in Australia, can further support the industry, facilitate joint collaboration, and create the right conditions for investment into both countries that benefit our economies and societies. So I look forward to the discussion, and without further ado, let me turn to our first panellist, Mr. Pravin Rao, Chairman of NASSCOM and Chief Operating Officer of Infosys. Thank you.
Good morning. Hopefully I'm audible.
Yes, Pravin, you're audible.
Hello.
Yes, you're audible.
Okay, thank you. Okay, good morning. First of all, thanks to Indo-Australian Chamber of Commerce for having me as a panelist. India and Australia offer outstanding potential as trade partners. This can only get stronger with much more frequent interactions between the corporates and the government. Australia is indeed a very important market for Indian technology industry, We have always been welcome in Australia. We have benefited from our partnerships, and we have also added value in this relationship. Amar, can you switch on to the next slide? This COVID-19 pandemic is a global humanitarian and health crisis. As countries across the globe have tried to contain the pandemic by shutting down borders, by imposing stringent lockdown conditions, we have also seen it having tremendous impact on people and businesses. In fact, the market demand as well as supply chains have been adversely impacted because of this lockdown. And we have a very high risk of entering into a global economic recession. In a short span of 4 months, we have seen more than 5 million people impacted globally, with South America now becoming the latest epicenter. Unfortunately, we have also seen yesterday the 100,000 deaths in US, and the impact has been wide and widespread. One of the trends we have seen from a search trend perspective, coronavirus has had by far the highest magnitude of search in the history of search, which actually reflects the anxiety that people are feeling and facing across the globe. In fact, in India, it has been 120 days today since the first COVID-19 case was reported. This was way back in Jan 30th in the state of Kerala. There are a lot of speculations about the nature of recovery. People are talking about V-shaped recovery, U-shaped recovery, L-shaped recovery, and so on. There's also speculation that this COVID pandemic will come in phases. But one thing is certain, we will have to live with this COVID for some time till a vaccine is developed. And by all accounts, it will take another 12 or 18 months. Next slide, please. The stock market has responded to this crisis with worrying volatility. In fact, in the month of March, the circuit breaker was triggered 4 times. And this is perhaps the first time it has happened so many times since the circuit breaker concept was introduced way back in 1980s. IMF has right now revised their projections, and they are now talking about 3% contraction. Ironically, IMF had forecasted about 3 months back a 3.3% global GDP growth. So obviously this contraction is much more severe than what we have witnessed during the 2007-2008 financial crisis, and perhaps something that we have not seen since the Great Depression. But some of the commentaries from corporates recently has also been fairly negative. We have also seen record levels of unemployment, and we have also seen, particularly in the Western world, record level of economic stimulus by the government. Only time will tell whether what it will do from a demand perspective. But right now, we are all staying for at least 1 or 2 quarters of very tough economic situation. Next slide, Amar. So navigating the COVID-19 pandemic and its aftermath will be one of the most important business challenges of our times. The Indian tech sector has shown remarkable resilience in dealing with this crisis. In a very short span of 2 to 3 weeks, once lockdown was announced in March, the industry was able to enable over 90% of its workforce to work from home. This implied companies had to provision laptops, they had to ship assets to employees' home, they had to increase the network bandwidth, In fact, in some cases, they had to also increase the speed of the last mile connectivity at employees' home through providing computing assets and devices. The industry has also worked very closely with the government in this endeavor, both at central and state level. In fact, the government earmarked IT and IT-enabled services as one of the essential services which enabled mobility of assets to employees' residences. The government has also helped in tweaking some of the policies which has enabled work from home. So we are extremely grateful and thankful to the government for the support during this time. Today, over 95% of the people are working from home. It's higher on the IT side and slightly lower on the BPM side. And a small percentage of people are today working from home who are working on mission critical applications or sensitive data. And they are obviously working in a very secure environment. The industry will continue its focus on investing in collaboration technologies and also making sure this remote ways of working is very secure from a information and data security perspective. The industry has also helped the government in terms of managing this COVID crisis by leveraging technology. Many of the companies have worked with both central and state governments in coming up with apps and to help in containing the pandemic. And these are primarily in the areas of tracking, tracing, and testing. NASSCOM has also created a task force which has worked closely with MIT and the Department of and Niti Aayog. They have now created a platform which is based on open source architecture. This platform using AI model will help in providing insights and enabling the governments to manage the crisis. A couple of weeks back, this platform was inaugurated and started being used in the state of Telangana. Even as we speak today, it is being inaugurated in the state of Karnataka. And this platform will subsequently be used in states like Kerala and some of the other states. Lastly, NASSCOM has also now started, the industry has also now started focusing on return to work. This obviously we have to do it keeping employee safety and security in mind. We want to do it in a very careful and calibrated manner. We will do it in a phased manner with the first phase about 10 to 15% of the people returning to work. In the second phase, maybe increasing it to about 30%. We expect about 50% of the workforce returns to work maybe in 4 to 6 months' time, and we will do it in a very slow and gradual manner. And in fact, we have to probably adopt to the new normal, which means that some part of work will always be work from home and some part of it will be work from office. The feedback from all these stakeholders has been extremely positive. In fact, many people have said they're surprised at the resilience demonstrated by the industry. They were expecting India to break and they were pleasantly surprised. So we are very grateful and thankful that the industry has demonstrated and enabled business continuity for our clients. Next slide, Amar. Obviously, our industry is part of the global value chain. Any disruptions in the value chain will have an impact on our industry as well. As you are aware, this COVID has had an impact on industries across geographies, and almost every industry has been impacted, both on the demand side of the equation as well as on the supply side. From our industry perspective, our impact will be mostly from the demand side shifts rather than from any supply side issues. So in the short term, we do expect slowing growth as demand slows down and some of the discretionary projects get shifted. But in the medium to long term, we expect industry to come back bouncing very strong, given that companies will have to, in the post-COVID era, focus a lot more on building resiliencies in their own system. What we are seeing is in the first order of priority for most corporates is today to enable their workforce to work in a remote manner. This means a lot of investments in their core infrastructure, a lot of investments in collaboration technologies, a lot of investment in cyber security technologies, and so on. So that's an opportunity. Technology has always helped in enabling remote ways of working, and this will only help in accelerating that. In fact, COVID-19 is perhaps the tipping point for digital transformation of the workplace. Now, the second thing the companies will start looking at is obviously bringing in greater resiliency to deal with pandemics of this nature. And in the new normal, remote ways of working will always be an element. And as such, we'll start seeing companies investing a lot more in digital channels. Given fears of contagion, people will start moving away from cash, and then we will see uptick in digital wallets or payments. Again, given the social distancing norms, you will find corporates and enterprises connecting with the end consumers in virtual ways. So this will spur increase in video conferencing, remote advising, telemedicine, and so on. So all this calls for technology investments, and so this will drive higher investments in technology for companies to enable this. And obviously, this pandemic has also shown companies which have digitized earlier have been able to deal with this crisis much better. Post this crisis, you will also see companies investing aggressively in terms of digitization, in terms of migrating workloads to cloud, securing their infrastructure, making their IT operations, business processes resilient. And this will also probably help in driving much more adoption of platforms and platform as a service kind of offerings. And lastly, at least in the short to medium term, companies are working hard on conserving cash and taking costs out. So from that perspective, this will also see a lot more leverage of outsourcing and offshoring at scale as companies start looking at saving costs. So net, while the short-term impact is definitely be felt for the industry like everyone else, in the medium to long term, the industry will bounce back stronger as companies will start investing much more in technology to build resilience in their business. Next slide, Amar. So this COVID pandemic has also, and the lockdown situation has also given opportunities for people to learn and upskill. In fact, similar to search trend, we have also seen a surfeit of webinars. In fact, on one hand, people have the anxiety of COVID. On the other hand, we also see anxiety of people worrying about missing some of the most important webinars. So net, I think, as I said, the industry has done well in dealing with the crisis. It has demonstrated resilience. It's one of the few industries which will probably be very fortunate to see some uptick in the medium to long term as hopefully world comes back to whatever is the new normal. So with this, I will just pause and we'll pass it on to the next panelist. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Praveen Rao, for those insights. We'll now move on to Ms. Meena Nagaraj. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Petrula. I thank India and Australian Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Michael Costa, for his opening remarks, and the President of NASSCOM, Mr. Praveen Rao. Taking the cue from the NASSCOM President, who has pretty much conveyed what the industry is going through, I would like to present a snapshot of what is from government perspective in this COVID scenario and the continued COVID scenario, what we would look forward to. The next slide, please. It's an overview of Karnataka's innovation ecosystems. I think, as everybody knows, Karnataka is one of the hub of innovation in terms of IT, ITeS, and biotechnology and other platforms. And this growth has happened over a period of the last 20 years. We are the third largest state in contributing to about 9.5% of GDP. So this ecosystem has been built in sync with a lot of participation and coordination with the industries. So this has been one of the first states which has come up with sector-specific policies, which has enabled what Praveen Rao said, that from the government end, that a lot of resilience that the industry has been able to put up also is because of the system that the government has also facilitated. We are one of the states which has policies in IT, in biotechnology, startups, AVGC, ESDM, electric vehicle, which is a very sector-specific policies and which will cater to these industries in a more focused manner. And we've been able to, Karnataka is ranked second in India as far as the patent application goes, which speaks a lot about our R&D and innovation initiatives. In terms of biotechnology, we have 60% biotechnology companies who are stationed in Karnataka, and we are the fastest growing cities in the world. That is what makes Karnataka more special, and I think the COVID scenario also shown, like the industry, I think the government machinery has also shown a lot of resilience to keep one of the busiest cities with the least COVID impact compared to all other neighboring states and key metros. And as far as NITI Aayog goes, we are ranked #1 in terms of India Innovation Index, and we have the 11th best startup ecosystems in the world. And all this encompasses to the thing that we have almost 350 plus global capability centers and 400 Fortune 500 companies. And as far as the ecosystem goes of startups, we are one of the most preferred destinations as far as the startup goes, as well as the GIC locations, where we have 34% of GICs which are globally, which are there located in Karnataka. Next slide, please. Okay, handling COVID strategies, since I'm also part of the group, one of the task force looks into COVID. Used by departments to ensure that COVID is kept minimal, and the private sectors also have played a key role. And I think, as NASSCOM says, tomorrow we will be launching one of the pandemic response tools. So it is both the private and the government sectors who worked in tandem to have it. We have a separate state war room which completely monitors the end-to-end COVID scenario that's happening in the state. A lot of analytics have been built in, a lot of latest softwares have been brought in. So from the perspective of the reach, we have telemedicine, which is already taken up in a big platform called the Aptamitra app, where we have a reach right to the last mile in the rural areas. In terms of agriculture, so it is because it's an agrarian economy, we try to ensure that the farmers go crisis. And the startup ecosystems we've been able to create, we've had a lot of grand challenges to where the startups were given opportunities and a platform to come up with innovative solutions to handle COVID in various sectors. And we've had very good responses of over 150 odd companies which were shortlisted. And pretty much the departments are also looking into these innovative solutions. And this is kind of made sure that the Bangalore has the least, I think it's almost the #1 city in the world, which has kept the COVID growth rate to a very, very minimal. So next slide, please. Yeah, if you can look at the other states, and we've also compared a city which is almost equal to Bangalore. I think Karnataka has done extremely well. So it's both in terms of it's ensured that the administrative setup, both in terms of health, in terms of police infrastructure, in terms of monitoring on technology. I think we've come through pretty well, where it's become a model city now. And this is what I think is giving a good confidence booster to the industry to restart. So what NASSCOM is saying back on track in a staggered fashion, I think the government has been pretty successful in keeping the corporate confidence along, and we've taken the entire corporate machinery along with it. with ourselves, and I think we've had a lot of interactions with the corporate, and thanks to the timely tweakings of policies that have happened, especially at the Government of India level, where to enable work from home, even the broadband policy on internet policy, things were tweaked. So this could enable the industry to function in a new normal. And healthcare wise, I think we are ready to ensure that we are able to cater to the pandemic in whatever fashion that comes up, throws up as a challenge to us. Yes, opening up the economy, we've seen a little bit of surge with the new international flights coming in and the interstate borders opening up. But having said that, I think Karnataka is totally geared up on the health scenario too. And we are constantly in touch with the industry to ensure that things are, taken care of. Next slide, please. Going by a few things that is there, as Mr. Rao already presented it, I think the most impacted from the discussions that we've had and conversations we've had with different verticals, I think the low impact has been in the large IT and ITeS, where they say the impact is almost 90% is business as usual, and there could be a 10% impact. But the high impact areas are, like everywhere else, is the manufacturing companies, where the workforce could not kind of, commence as we thought we could. And e-commerce companies, initially, I would say, did get impacted highly, because, and then we went through a gradual phase of opening up, at least essential services. And I think post June, things will be normal. But the high impact three criteria are those: electronics and manufacturing, e-commerce, and startups, of course. I think NASSCOM has estimated that 40% of the startups have come to a grinding halt. And like everywhere else, the travel and hospitality, the financial services, health and insurance, I think, would fall under the bracket where the impact is high now. But going forward, I think that would be an area where we're looking at it can reverse in the next 6 months, is what is told to us, that it will be almost on a 20% growth platform. In terms of a midterm, long-term perspective, we are looking at certain incentivization. I wouldn't say that things will come to a absolute normal very quickly. Karnataka is a state which is waiting and watching, and we won't want to take knee-jerk reactions and bring in announcements which we will not be able to sustain in the long run. So we are looking at, Government of India has come up with a lot of schemes to promote manufacturing. We have 3 new announcements that have happened to enable manufacturing sectors, like the EMC 2.0. There's a SPECS project that has come, which is going to help, product-linked, even the product-linked manufacturing sectors. There is a new scheme that is coming, and so those are the things which you are looking at as an initiative to boost some kind of a boost manufacturing sector. In the real estate sector, we are looking at some government is thinking on a few things. In terms of land, we've already Karnataka has made a transformational policy amendment or an act amendment where we allow the companies now to directly purchase land from the buyer. So which has been a long and ask of the industry, and this is a single point of a contact where even it's a single window approval scheme, and there is a deemed conversion, which was one of the key aspects of red tapeism which always industry raised with the government. That is one major transformational change. In labor sector also we are bringing some changes, but we like to wait and watch and take a more informed decision and a long-lasting one. Next slide, please. Our responses, during this entire COVID scenario, from the industry, we've had a lot of webinars and a lot of interactions, at a timely fashion. And we did conduct a bit of a preliminary survey. This is at a very small sample size, and this will go on for a longer time so that it will help us decide what would be the next move and a more effective move from the government side. And what we found that this is one of the things that 91% were happy to engage with the government for COVID-related activities, and we've taken them along. And 85% have agreed that Karnataka has handled the crisis well. I think it came up even in the last presentation which the President NASSCOM raised. And this has been a good confidence building, and I know this entire scenario, the outcome has been some amount of trust deficit between and government we've been able to bring. And it has shown that I think both go together to ensure things are, the new normal is achieved pretty quickly. And the 44% of the startups have responded that, that is the major impact, as I said, they've come the 25% reduction in their orders during lockdown. And this is a scenario we are trying to look where we are trying to push certain policies and schemes in the next 2-3 months, which will enable the resurgence of the startup ecosystem. Next. I think this is pretty much what I've told you in terms of what done. Had good amount of consultations and data collection drive. I think the regulatory changes we are looking, as I said, it will be able to something more concrete in place. We are evaluating the whole process right now, and definitely it will be of policies that were formed up, and our current policies which are undergoing revision will take into the post-COVID scenario and ensure that those factors are encompassed. Ensure that the policy is sustained for a longer period of time. And we are definitely looking forward to engaging with our other international partners and investors like all others. Next. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Nagaraj, for that comprehensive overview from the Government of India and Karnataka government perspective. Very reassuring. And now I would like to move on to our final speaker, Andrew Tilak, who will give us the Australia government perspective on this. Having said that, he has extensive experience in the private sector as well. Over to you, Andrew.
Well, thanks very much, Petula, and it's an honour to be part of this Indo-Australia Chamber of Commerce event. And I'd like to acknowledge the presence of the Deputy Consul General, Michael Costa, and thank him for his remarks earlier, and Petula yourself for arranging this event. And it's an honour to be on this panel here with Mr. Pravin Rao from Infosys and Ms. Nagaraj from the state of Karnataka. I have great fond memories of Karnataka. In my one visit to India, I spent almost all my time there and gained enormous appreciation for what the state has achieved and the importance of Bangalore as a hub in this sector. And I think that was borne out very clearly in both presentations that we've just heard. I might move on to my slides, and conscious of time, I'll just highlight the key points here. But we are very proud of the relationship between Australia and India, as Mr. Costa mentioned earlier. And if we can just move on to the next slide, you won't be surprised to hear that we believe Australia is a very attractive location for business. It's one of the top 10 global locations, and that's really based on a long-standing economic performance, a very resilient economy of 29 years of consistent growth. Obviously, 2020 may be challenging on that front. But the other factor that I think is very important is that we have a very robust regulatory environment, which of course is very important for business. If we can just move on to the next slide. Innovation is very important to us. We believe there's a lot of opportunities in innovation in Australia and indeed in linking with India. It's a very sophisticated economy. It's got a very advanced customer base, both on the corporate side and also in consumers, and is an excellent test market, which I think provides many opportunities between our two countries. Just moving on to the next slide again about Australia, and I imagine most members of the Chamber will be very familiar with the layout of Australia and the population density, which of course is very much condensed in the southeast corner. Australia, a large country geographically, but a population of only 24 million, but we are the 12th largest economy in the world, so it is a significant market. And Victoria makes up a quarter of the population, around a quarter of the country's GDP. It's one of the fastest growing parts of the country. Melbourne is the fastest growing city in the country, and that provides a lot of confidence to people who are looking to invest in Australia that the growth is happening in Victoria. If we just move on to the next slide, a bit of a historical perspective here, that we really see the digital economy as a natural next step for the economy here. If you go right back 50 years, we have evolved from manufacturing through professional services, financial services, tourism, visitor economy. Education has been an enormous sector, of course, with over 70,000 Indian students here last year. The creative economy, and now we have an opportunity that I think builds on the livability of Victoria. Melbourne has been one of the most livable cities in the world. It was rated the #1 city for livability for 7 years in a row. It's now ranked #2 behind Vienna in Austria. No shame in that. But you can see the link between livability as an attribute of a city and the digital economy. And I think we've talked a little bit today about the COVID-19 impact, and the use of digital in tracing cases and preparing the public for COVID-19 has been important. And we have a COVID safe app in Australia for loading on people's phones that is important in ensuring people can understand what's happened with transmission and can trace should there be a positive contact through the app. We might move on to the next slide, which was really looking at the connection between the state of Victoria and India, and it's a very, very significant connection. It makes up 3% of Melbourne's total population. It's the largest city for Indian residents in Australia, and there are a number of Indian companies that are very prominent here, including in ITeS, which we're delighted to retain the connection and hear the positive comments of Mr. Rao today. You'll see there's a couple of photos there of the famous Melbourne cricket ground. One of the other famous events is the Australian Open and tennis tournament, and Infosys is a major sponsor of that tournament, and we're grateful for their contribution. The other point is that the Victorian government has a real focus on India. We have an office in Bengaluru run by Michelle Wade and another office in Mumbai. We have a strategy for Victoria and India and developing that relationship, and that was released by the Premier of the state on his visit to India in 2018. It's a very important relationship for the state, and it's particularly important for our tech sector, including the presence of those companies noted on the slide, but also for Victorian companies engaging with the Indian market. If we just move to the next slide, a couple of comments on COVID, and we'll keep it brief, but from our perspective, it is having an impact on the IT sector, particularly large organisations. It's clearly placed more emphasis on business continuity plans and risk. Remote working has now become very important, as we've talked about, as has supply chains, and having good data on your supply chains is clearly very important. And Mr. Rao talked about Infosys' work in that area as well, which is clearly part of the future. Small business as well, it really has brought the digital economy to small business in an accelerated way. It's very, very important that small businesses are digitally literate, and we're placing emphasis on that as a state government. Small businesses have had to adapt, provide staff with laptops to enable them to work remotely, and that has all happened very quickly, and that's going to be a real legacy of this period. And the government as well, there's obviously a big emphasis on operating digitally and providing digital services to the public. So the impact is really quite profound, as I'm sure everyone will agree. We've heard a bit about the Karnataka's response to the crisis, and I do commend how India has dealt with COVID-19 and the state of Karnataka. Here in Victoria, we have set up a business support fund for the small businesses that have been affected by COVID-19. And as Mr. Costa said earlier, the national government has also announced some significant policies to support business, including the JobKeeper program. If we just move on to the next slide, I really just want to finish up with, I suppose, on a positive note on the opportunities that we see between India and Victoria in the IT sector. And I think once we're through this COVID-19 period, the prospects are very bright for the mutual opportunities between our two locations. I've listed 8 there, but there's probably a lot more that we could add. Sports tech, of course, a passion of both places. We're very proud of our sports tech sector, and you'll see the photo there of Catapult, the wearable devices, and Catapult are very involved in the Indian Premier League cricket, and it's a great market for that company and for sports tech. EduTech is another example, a very strong sector in Victoria. Some of the best universities in the country are in Melbourne, and a very strong training system as well. And there's a number of companies that are doing very well in India on the EduTech side. EduGrowth is a company that provides learning management systems and assessment tools. I've done a lot of business in India. And another company called Nelnet has a digital fee pay management system for universities, have also done work in India, just as 2 examples. Cybersecurity is obviously going to be very important in this digital economy that we're talking about. Wipro have a major cybersecurity facility in Melbourne, and have also a partnership with Swinburne University that we're very proud of. Health is obviously a key sector at this time, but it's also a real strength of Victoria. We have a number of engagements with India, including the MedTech actuator, which works with startup companies, and they have a partnership with the state of Karnataka, and we think that's very encouraging for two-way exchange in this growing tech sector of health tech. Smart cities, of course, goes along with that livability theme that I touched on earlier. A very, very good complementary relationship between Victoria and India. Victorian company Aconex, which is a construction software company, is very active in India, and I believe has an office in Bengaluru. Other sort of areas such as water, Rubicon is a Victorian company which does a lot of work in India around water, and road safety is another area where Victoria has a lot of strength. And in fact, the Victorian Government Roads Authority has done work in India and road safety. Smart energy is another one where we believe there's a great potential. There's a lot of interest in efficient use of energy, of providing technology to the energy sector. And the Startup Bootcamp is an example of a accelerator focused on the energy sector that has done two-way exchanges with India. And just finally, the startup sector per se in the broad, I think there's enormous opportunities in startup sector, both Victorian companies that seek to link up with Indian companies, but also Indian companies looking to a test market or a Western market. The welcome mat is open here in Victoria. So with that, I want to thank once again the Indo-Australian Chamber of Commerce. It's an honour to be on this panel. It's wonderful to see the relationship between Victoria and India prospering so well, and the Chamber is very significant in that. And we look forward to the questions and answers. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you so much for the insightful presentation, both from Australia as well as from Victoria. Now, in the interest of time, we are really got a few minutes left. Could I just request all the panelists to have their screens on and their mics on? And also, if all the participants could start posing your questions on the chat box there so that we could start taking off. As I mentioned, with the interest of time, I'm just going to pose one question each for each of the panelists. And then for any of the unanswered questions, the team will get back to you in a week's time or so with the responses from them. So the first question I'd like to ask is to Ms. Nagraj. This is a question that's come from Mr. Vikas Apte. As you stressed upon work from home, which could be a new normal for most IT and IT-enabled services, the challenge today is to have a robust infrastructure to enable them, including telecommunications, bandwidths, to have an effective work from home environment. So what is the government support for companies to enable them to have that kind of initiative?
Hear me?
Ma'am, could you hear me?
Regarding the infrastructure, all I can say is not only IT and ITeS, I think 80% of our overall workforce work from home in Bangalore and in various parts of Tier 2 cities. I think that kind of industry, we had only very minimal requests for our essential service passes that we gave. Out of our 1.9 ITeS, it was only 5,000 movement passes that we had issued over these 2.5 month period, which also speaks loudly about that our infrastructure has already been tested over these 2.5 months. Having said that, the Department of Telecom incentivized with a lot of tweaking in the policies to infrastructure of the there was a lot of given to companies to provide Wi-Fi services, and we continue to do this to come forward. Even government into having a conversation. As of now, I think the only that we look to a rainy season is the power supply, and conversation with the power companies and that been running 24/7. So that is the only challenge we are looking at this point in time. But in terms of overall infrastructure and bandwidth, conversations have happened with the company, and wherever we found that there is a gap, the government is trying to facilitate an interdepartmental coordination already. We are at it.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Just I knew the mic wasn't clear and we couldn't hear a lot of the conversation. But just to summarize, she mentioned that there's been very limited requests from the companies because the work from home seems to be working for them in terms of the passes. The only issue that they are facing right now is with the power supplies, and the government is taking that initiative and they are coordinating it with the industry in terms of how that can be met. So thank you so much, ma'am, for that thing. The next question is to Mr. Rao. Mr. Rao, there's two parts to this question. One is there's a question about touch-free measures. Has NASSCOM got a list of do's and don'ts for the IT and ITeS companies, for your member companies? And the other one is you mentioned about supply and growth, and of course you are focused more on the demand bit of it. But we see that the gaming, that is one sector that has grown like 6x times recently during the COVID crisis. Is there something that we could do in terms of the task force or the supply to be transferred into industries or the micro industries that are doing well?
Yeah. So on the first question, NASSCOM has come up with a standard operating procedures in consultation with the industry and government. So this broadly following guidelines from the government, WHO, and other things. And this has been shared with the industry. And each of the companies have also tweaked it based on their own context. So this covers all aspects of security, right from people downloading RFGS-A2 app, doing self-declaration about whether they had any contact with positive cases, then mandating wearing of masks, frequent sanitizing of workplaces, then social distancing right from commute to workplace and in common areas, all those of things. And we also have a very elaborate standard operating procedures, how to deal with in an unfortunate event of someone testing positive, what are the steps to be taken and so forth. So I think that's a very elaborate thing that the industry has come up with in consultation, and it follows all the guidelines laid by both the government as well as WHO. And most companies, as I said, have already started using it as we return to work. On the second question, obviously, there are opportunities in many related fields like gaming. There'll be lot more opportunities. Anything to do with virtual channels, I think, now given the new ways of working, new normal, it will only spur more and more demand. And obviously, many of these ideas come from startup community. And while I didn't touch upon in my presentation, I think Ms. Meena talked about it. Whereas some of the SMEs and startup communities are in some sense struggling. So the industry is trying to work with them along with help from the government to see how can help them guide with it. And many of the innovative ideas will come from these small startups, SMEs, and other things, and the skills and capabilities to do that. So industry is actually working in terms of enabling them. NASSCOM itself has a lot of COEs for startups. We have got what we call tech warehouses and other things. And so some of those things will continue to enable. We'll also continue to have a lot of interactions between larger companies as well as small startup companies, so that large companies can also leverage startups in these times in terms of both market access and also taking their innovative ideas to the market. So fair amount of things going on, and I'm sure there'll be a lot more of innovative and new opportunities that will emerge from the new normal.
Sure. Thank you, sir. Thank you for that. And we've just got the last question for Andrew here. Andrew, again, there's two parts to your question. The first one is with the complete uncertainty with U.S. elections, the oil crisis, the manpower situation in Middle East, the entire travel, which I think that's the second part of the question, because your trade missions are a very important part of the Australian government. The Victorian government does, inbound and outbound trade missions. How do you see the entire business operation changing in the next 6 months?
Well, thank you, Vidyam. That is quite a question. Look, I think as you said, uncertainty is part of doing business, but there has probably never been a period of uncertainty in our lifetime such as what we're experiencing now. And in particular in relation to Australia, and I think it's similar to India, it's a very global economy here. We are a very open country. We have extensive supply chains, both in and out, that we have come to rely on and have been put in place over a long period of time. And suddenly, this is a major, major change to have the borders closed, to have international flights virtually ceased, to have tourism and international students stop coming, is a major, major change. So we have quickly had to adapt, as I'm sure India has, to make sure we have availability of essential items, and that's been a key focus in the response to the pandemic. And I think that's gone very well here. And clearly this is going to be the case for a period of time, that without flights and international travel, it is going to be a domestic focus for a period of time. But I'm very confident that once we're through this period, we will resume a very open international economy, and that will be something that we all look forward to. Australia has benefited greatly from its trade with India and other countries. It will greatly benefit from the people exchanges as well with tourism and international students. And we definitely look forward to those days returning once we're through this pandemic.
Thanks, Andrew. Thank you so much. I think we just crossed our time over here, but I'm just going to hand it over to Deepak. Deepak, over to you now.
Thank you, Vidya. And there's a saying that when you have a cold, keep your ears clean. And I think in a crisis situation like this that we are all finding ourselves in, it's very important for us to listen. And webinars such as this, the aim is really to convey as much information as we can so that people can make those informed decisions in their businesses. And I think what I heard today from our three speakers was very promising. First of all, it's so nice to see such progressiveness from both the government of Karnataka as well as what Andrew talked about happening in Victoria and in Australia. And, the way they have navigated this crisis, setting up the war rooms, but also looking at how technology can help them.
Let me take this opportunity to thank everyone for joining us today, all our attendees and our speakers, panelists, Michael Costa, and the entire team. Thank you also to Amar and Manisha for coordinating this. And with that, we hope you enjoyed it. If there are any questions, do let us know and we'll get you responses from the panelists and send it in a week's time. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a great week. Bye then.